housing, income, as well as health care, that those gaps are closed.
Charlie and Martha, we're running short on time, so could you give me one example to address what Keela's talking about?
Well, let me first say, I think that we want in Massachusetts community policing, not combat policing, and that means having well-trained and diversified police departments, and I would propose getting men and women in our fire, teaching, police services by loan forgiveness, or getting people involved in areas of public service that would address some of those issues, at least for policing.
Charlie Baker, can you give me one example addressing Akila's question?
I'm very proud of the fact that I was endorsed by the Massachusetts Minority Law Enforcement Officers Association because of the time and the effort I've made getting to know the folks in those communities of color, and a huge part of my economic development plan is about creating economic opportunity and improving the quality of education and public safety in those communities. And I was proud to stand with 40 or 50 leaders from those communities a week ago today in Roxbury to talk about that plan and to gain their support. The one other thing I would say quickly on this, I just happened to do a ride-along the Friday night of when Ferguson was breaking, and to the fellow named Sergeant Johnson, and I wanted him to just take me around the city for 5 or 6 hours and show me what goes on in Boston, urban Boston. And the first thing he did was he took me to Dorchester High School and to Hunt Field, where they were holding Pop Warner practice and cooking hamburgers and hot dogs and cheerleading practice. And he said, this is what goes on in this community, these communities on Friday night, which no one ever talks about. And he knew every single coach, and he knew half the parents who were there. And I think one of the things we have to do if we want to avoid situations like that is we have got to embed ourselves as human beings in these communities so that people understand that not only do we care about them, but we get where they're coming from, and they can see us, and that they know we're going to, if we make a commitment to them, we're going to follow through on it.
Well, in fairness, I've done that for about 18 years as an assistant district attorney and a district attorney with community policing, community-based justice, domestic violence victims. So I'm glad you got the ride along, Charlie. It's an important job for the governor to make sure that we have a good criminal justice system that's fair to everybody.
Well, here's one more thing that's very important in communities of color, and that's education, of course, and one of those educational factors is charter schools. A few months ago, I went to one of those charter school drawings where they draw the names about the kids that went in, and I was stunned because nobody was there, no parents, no kids. Then I realized the reason they didn't come is because so few kids can get in. It's too depressing and upsetting to go to these things and not get called year after year after year. Martha-Coakley, you've been supportive, not that strongly, for charter schools, even though there's 45,000 kids on the list. And Charlie Baker has said that denying the options of charter schools to poor kids is nothing less, this is a quote from him, than an affront to their civil rights. So how is he wrong?
Well, so this is where we differ, because to me it's about education. I think we've made this distinction between charters or not charters. Remember, charters were the reason that we were able to see what works and what doesn't work. Extended learning time, early education, which I support, that Charlie doesn't. The ways in which we're going to give every kid the best possible education. It's not about charters or not. It's about making sure we keep that promise to take those best practices from charters and see them in our district schools. We've got pilot innovation schools. We know what works.
You know, before Charlie responds to the charter school question, you mentioned pre-K. On primary night, you celebrated your universal, as you call it, pre-K plan. The universal plan is morphed into a plan where 16 or 17,000 people on the waiting list will get covered. Hardly universal. It's roughly a sixth of the number of people who need support. What happened?
Well, I still support universal pre-K. What I've said is that we are going to start with 17,000 kids at $150 million immediately to get them into places that we have. There are parents that have that ability now. I'm trying to level the playing field and make that start for the kids that we know need it.
Charter schools?
First of all, the Attorney General's position on early childhood ed and mine are basically the same. And I'm glad to see that now that she's in a general election, she agrees with me that we should continue to make targeted investments in expanding our participation in pre-K. On the charter school question, I've spent a lot of time in a lot of city schools over the course of this race. Parochial, traditional, charter. What I'm looking for is excellence. And there are many charter schools out there that do a great job, and there are 45,000 parents on a waiting list. Those parents deserve choices, okay? When I knock doors in Dorchester, when I knock doors in Mattapan, when I knock doors in Springfield, the first question that comes up when I'm talking to somebody who has school-age kids is, I don't have enough choices for my kids. It is the number, and these people are not, they are desperate when they talk about this. I mean, for anybody who has kids, it kills you to hear the concern in their voice. And there are a lot of great traditional schools out there too, filled with great teachers. And one of the things I've talked a lot about during this campaign is wanting to create relationships between folks who are actually doing a terrific job of educating kids in traditional public schools with other folks in public schools. We don't do the in-service type learning and teaching and best practices sharing that we should be doing. And as governor, I'm going to make that happen 2, 3, 4 times a year. We've got to start doing that because there are stars performing in urban education, and we are not leveraging that.
We only have 10 minutes left. We're going to move to an issue that is huge in this country and in the state: income inequality. 2 measures, very briefly, I want to get your thoughts on. 1, the minimum wage increase that went to $11, and 2, question 4, which would give mandatory paid sick leave to anybody who works in a place with more than 11 people. You support both those things.
Yes,
the minimum wage hike. Very quickly, are you not concerned about the arguments of small business that one or both of these things are going to croak a lot of them?
No, and the minimum wage has been passed. I think most people supported that. It makes sense because we have families that are living from week to week to pay their rent or to put food on their table. I met a couple that works at Logan Airport. She works all night cleaning planes. He works all day cleaning planes. They can barely afford to put food on their table for their 16-year-old kid. That's not right. And the corporations they work for are doing quite well, thank you. This income inequality, as we turn this economy around, has to be for everybody. And
Only 2 states in the country have mandatory paid sick leave, Connecticut and California. We would be the outlier if we became the third, in part because small businesses say it's a killer.
Well, I think that it is absolutely a cost of doing business that they will be able to afford. This is a right for people who, most people in this audience tonight, and I bet many of our viewers don't worry about earned sick time. If they are sick, their kid is sick, they are about to lose their jobs if they don't show up. And it's a public health issue if people are sick. And, Jim, it mostly affects women. It's disproportionately on minimum wage women who do have child care responsibilities, who don't have those vouchers yet for early education. This is just a fairness issue, and I support it. I think people overwhelmingly in Massachusetts support it.
Charlie Baker, quickly, if we can. 1, you had said early in the campaign that you would consider, was your word, a sub-minimum wage for teenagers and people in training. Are you still considering it?
Well, I think we should go ahead and pursue what's happened, which I supported on the minimum wage legislatively, but I also believe we should, and I would file a bill as governor and advocate for small business tax credits for small businesses so that they have the ability to absorb the increase in the minimum wage without taking hours away from people or jobs
How
away
about the
from
sub-minimum wage? Is it still on your
No, I prefer to just go with what we've got.
Well, very quickly on question 4, you've proposed the threshold not of 11 employees or more, but 50 or more. We called the NFIB, National Federation of Independent Businesses. That means 120,000 businesses, maybe within the neighborhood of 1 million employees, would not benefit from paid sick leave. Does that not trouble you?
Well, that would also be the same as the Connecticut law, by the way, which, as you point out, there are only 2 states in the country that have this law, and both of them, by the way, have a lot more flexibility than the Massachusetts law, as written, would propose. I support doing this. I will work with the legislature aggressively to get it done, but I worry a lot if we're all concerned about jobs and about small businesses and their ability to grow and thrive and create opportunity here, that this puts us at a significant disadvantage with small businesses.
1.2 million people who wouldn't get sick time, earned sick time, under Charlie's proposal.
Okay, both of you.
There are a lot of people, by the way, who are going to lose some of their existing flex benefits when that thing passes because they won't be able to access the flex benefits that their companies have currently put in place.
Okay,
there will be unintended consequences.
Both of you have been involved in some behavior which raises some ethical questions. Charlie and Martha-Coakley failed to disclose that an organization run by the co-chair of a finance committee was the prime beneficiary of a lawsuit she filed against Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So do you think the public should be worried about this, Charlie?
I think the opportunity to, as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the Commonwealth and as the overseer of the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, I think it would have been appropriate for the Attorney General to disclose that relationship, especially since she had financial opportunities. This woman raised money for her as well and was the sole beneficiary of the proposal. Yeah.
Martha,
The premises in your question are false, Marjorie. That statute, because I've been fighting, as everybody knows, to keep people in their homes, the big barriers, Fannie and Freddie. The only purpose in that statute was to make sure that homeowners could stay in their homes. It's not the only company that does that. It's a not-for-profit, and we disclosed everything we did that we needed to. We did exactly what we needed.
But the issue was the closeness of the woman that was involved.
We checked and we checked again, and we did exactly what we did. All of her contributions were disclosed. That's what the law requires. We did everything we needed to do.
Martha, let's talk about Charlie for a minute. Charlie, some critics have suggested he engaged in pay-to-play. He gave $10,000 to the New Jersey GOP. Just 7 months before General Catalyst, that's the investment firm where he's listed as an executive in residence, received $15 million from the state's pension fund. By the way, they recently sold that. Should voters be concerned about that? Charlie said he did nothing wrong legally or otherwise. Should voters be concerned about that?
Yeah.
Why?
Because he's under investigation now for a pay-to-play scheme. Those facts, at least on their face, indicate, at least from my point of view, a reason to investigate. He's under investigation. He said under 33 different times he filed that he was a partner and employee of it. If that's the case, then he is in violation of the law. And if he's not, then he should disclose his contract with Catalyst as to what his relationship
if I can,
is.
the reports today, Charlie Baker, that Chris Christie and the treasurer of New Jersey, who was appointed by Chris Christie, who's a supporter of yours, the governor there, is holding up release of the investigation about this pay-to-play thing until several days after the election in Massachusetts. Would you use this opportunity now to urge Christie and his treasurer to disclose whatever their investigation is into your thing immediately prior to November 4th?
Well, I certainly can't control whatever the
but would
state
you
of New
ask
Jersey
them to
does
do
with this.
that?
Well, they're doing an investigation. I stayed as far away from it as I possibly can get, which I think is appropriate. And they'll issue their report whenever they issue it. But I will say this. You know, Martha mentioned the fact that 33 times I pointed out the fact that I was working with General Catalyst. I've been completely transparent about this from the beginning. I've never tried to hide anything on this. And when issues were raised about it, I hired the former general counsel of the Federal Election Commission and gave him all the documentation and said, if there's something I need to do here, tell me.
So why
and he
wouldn't
wrote a brief on it. Let me finish. And he gave me, and I wrote a brief on it, and I made that brief publicly available to anybody who wanted to see it.
Why wouldn't you urge the governor of New Jersey to disclose it immediately so the voters of Massachusetts have an objective perspective?
The New Jersey Pension Board is going to make, it's the pension board in New Jersey is going to make their decision and issue their ruling whenever they finish their study. And as far as I can tell, based on the work that was done by the former lawyer for the FEC, I've done nothing wrong.
Okay.
But he could resolve it by disclosing his employment contract. That would be the easiest route.
Okay, we're very short on time. Can I just...
Can I just point out that there's only one person at this table who's actually paid a campaign violation fine, and that would be the Attorney General.
You want to...
Yeah, absolutely.
10 seconds.
I have been completely transparent when we have had errors that have been pointed out. We fixed them. It's not a fine. We reverted the money to where it should have gone. And I always have done that. That's the transparency. That's why I'm calling on you to release your employment contract.
We're going to release the tension. We have 3 minutes left for about 60 seconds. You want to release it, Marjorie, or should I?
Yeah, let's hear from Ty Burr of the Boston Globe. He's going to ask something serious about...
movie question.
Well, he was going to ask
He's going to ask a serious question about taxes, the movie tax credit. We didn't have time. So he's going to ask you just one quick question. Here he is.
Who would play you in the movie of this campaign, and who would play your opponent?
And we mean fast, Charlie.
Okay.
Who plays you, and it's not going to be me, and who plays your opponent?
Martha-Coakley. Okay, fine. Oh, come on.
Okay.
Reese Witherspoon. How's that?
Sure.
Okay, who plays Charlie Baker?
Look at them looking at each other. Okay, forget that.
No, how about...
Okay, fine. You want to say it?
I got it.
Okay.
Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson, that's
Clint
a good one.
Eastwood.
Plays her or you? Wall Street. Okay, fine. Very quickly here, final question. Same question we asked John Connolly and Marty Walsh before we ended the debate in the mayor's race. Most of tonight's focused on power you have if you're elected. Let's talk about power you don't have. Pick one issue that you don't have any statutory power, you can't increase funding for, that you would use the bully pulpit of the governor's office to advance. No statutory power, you just use your position as governor of Massachusetts to try to move the public on. What would that be, Charlie Baker? You have 30 seconds.
We desperately need to create more things at night for kids to do in urban communities. And I would like to put together a big coalition of folks who are involved in all kinds of recreational and community-based and athletic activities across the Commonwealth involving urban communities and come up with things kids can do at night.
Because it is the midnight basketball. Bring it back.
Love to have that too, because that's a big, big problem.
How about you, Martha?
Well, you could do that. I mean, the legislature could authorize funds to do
Bully
that.
pulpit, what do you do?
Yeah, I think, I am most concerned about kids like young girls at Jermaine Lawrence School for Girls and others in not-for-profit settings that just don't have the resources.